Hi, and thanks for joining me. When I reviewed Prince Harry's book Spare, I pretty much reviewed all of the book. I did deep dives and I found things other people didn't find, and I really enjoyed the intellectual exercise of reviewing that book. But there were a few areas I didn't go. One was his active military service. I did actually cover a lot of his training just because I just didn't feel I had the right really to comment, because I've never actually been in the military. I've never represented my country, so I thought, well, who am I to judge? And the other thing was our late Majesty's death. I didn't cover that either because the book came out a mere 4 months and a few days after Queen Elizabeth II died. And I thought it was just too raw, it was too soon, and I just didn't want to go there. Well, the reason why I'm going there in this video is because I think it's really important, if only to really wrap up this story. I think the chapter in Spare about Harry actually seeing his granny in her private bedroom at Balmoral, I think the way he betrayed her by writing about that scene is the very reason why the royal family will never forgive or forget what Harry did. I know a lot of other experts tout all the other things, the fight with William and the dog bowl and betraying Kate and making out that Kate was standoffish and cold and all the awful things about, the then Prince Charles being a cold father and all that. And also what he said about Camilla and the fact that, that was the red line for King Charles III, and he'll never forgive Harry for actually overstepping the mark with his remarks about Camilla. All that's valid. Yes, I take it on board, but I think it's wrong. I think the one point where he passed the point of no return was the death scene in Spare. When you think about it, Queen Elizabeth II had very little that was private in her life. I mean, really private. Pretty much everything had been conveyed or betrayed, or at some point we knew an awful lot about our late Queen. But there were a few moments she had, intimate family relationships she could rely and trust, being up at Balmoral, being able to hoot around in her car and drive too fast and go on picnics and barbecues and play with her grandchildren. They were special moments to her. They were sacred moments to her. And Balmoral really was her happy and private, happy place. So that's all the more shocking that when Princess Anne actually allowed her nephew to go up the stairs and visit Granny soon after her death, I don't think she thought in a million years that he was going to betray the family and betray his granny and actually write about that scene in his tacky little book. Now, I saw an article in The Independent, which I will share with you right now. And it just has got a headline, Royal News Live, King Charles unable to forgive Prince Harry for claims in Spare book. Now, it goes on to say, to quote a royal biographer, Christopher Anderson, who said that the monarch loves his son, but is finding it impossible to stop holding a grudge after what the Duke of Sussex wrote, especially about Queen Camilla. Well, I think that's wrong. I really think that's wrong. Because when it all comes down to it, I think Camilla would be able to cope. I think King Charles III would be able to cope. I think those sorts of indiscretions and hurt feelings could be overlooked and overcome. But when it comes to betraying the late sovereign, when you think about it, when someone's just died, they're at their most intimately vulnerable. I mean, at that point, only very trusted people would be allowed into that inner sanctum. Only very intimate, trusted, close family members would have been allowed to enter the Queen's bedroom at Balmoral soon after her death. That is sort of a real privilege. And it is something that should not be taken lightly, and it is something that should never, ever be betrayed. Now, the royal family has to share their grief with everybody. Pretty much by the next morning, it kicked off. All the plan kicked off, and then 10 days of mourning sort of went by where the royal family had to be front and centre. They had to carry out all these formal duties, but they also had to play the role of comforting the people of the United Kingdom in their grief. That is their role. They put duty first. And I must say they did it splendidly. They did it immaculately. It was just amazing. It was very brave. I mean, who can forget, King Charles III's first speech? It was stunning. It was something that is unforgettable. It was beautifully done and it moved everybody and it gave everybody a real sense of comfort and continuity. So they were on duty. They were at work, but the only moment that they had was those first few hours soon after her death, where it was just family. It was just trusted people, where they didn't have to be on show, where they could allow their grief to, bubble to the surface, and where they could actually just be a family. And he went into that and then betrayed them all. So let's have a look at how Prince Harry actually betrayed everyone in his family in Spare, and this is how it was portrayed in the book. Now, Princess Anne actually led him upstairs to his granny's bedroom. I braced myself, went in. The room was dimly lit, unfamiliar. I'd been inside it only once in my life. I moved ahead uncertainly, and there she was. Now, at that moment, do you think our late Majesty was giving permission for Harry to observe this scene, to have his last moments with her in that intimate private space, and then 4 months and a few days later, write about it in his tacky book for money? Do you think our late Majesty, do you think that would have been the most awful form of betrayal that she could even imagine? Do you think that she could even fathom that her grandson would sink so horribly low? I don't think she could. I don't think she could foresee that he would do something so despicable. So we'll go on and read on. I moved ahead uncertainly, and there she was. I stood frozen, staring. I stared and stared. It was difficult. I kept on thinking how I'd regretted not seeing my mother at the end. So not only did he betray her at her most intimate and private moment, where she was completely vulnerable and needed the protection of her family, he then makes it about him and makes her death about his mother's death. So he doesn't even give the late sovereign the honour of having her own death. He immediately equates it with his feelings and his moment of finding out about his mother's death. Do you see how disrespectful that is? Do you see how sick that is? And do you see that that is exactly why the royal family will never forgive him? They will never trust him. It doesn't matter what the papers say. It doesn't matter what they throw up, potential reconciliations and all the silly guff they write about. It's not going to happen. Because if you can't trust your grandson at your most intimate and vulnerable moment, your death, when could you ever trust him with absolutely anything? So we'll go on. There's more, and it's quite sickening, and I don't think it's really got the attention that it has deserved. I whispered to her that I hope she was happy, that I hope she was with Grandpa. Well, that's nice. Honestly, this surpasses the Oprah Winfrey interview. It surpasses the betrayal of the docuseries. It is the ultimate betrayal, and it is so self-serving and so narcissistic and so wrong and evil. I just can't believe it. I said that I was in awe of her carrying out her duties to the last, the Jubilee. Anyway, I won't go on. It is truly, truly sickening, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it from your own family's perspective, if you had, your grandmother and she was lying, just recently died in her private space, her bedroom, and members of the family were requesting to be with her for a few minutes and just to think about what she meant to you and all that sort of thing, well, how would you feel if someone went off and 4 months later published that scene without permission for money? I left the room, went back along the corridor, across the tartan carpet, past the statue of Queen Victoria. Your Majesty. Oh, that's cute, Harry. Have a cute little aside, make reference to the fact that when you were young, every time you and William used to go past that statue, you used to bow and say, Your Majesty. Oh, that's really appropriate. I rang Meg, told her I'd made it. Well, look, you hopped on a plane. Honestly, a chartered private jet. You didn't exactly, canoe your way there. It wasn't any great feat of bravery to actually make it to Balmoral. And how despicable that when you went into our late Majesty Queen's private bedroom, that you were taking note of everything so that you could put it in your book. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't relay it all to Meg in that phone call while she took notes to make sure that the ghostwriter got a really clear description to add to the already ready-to-publish book. You were just waiting for Queen Elizabeth II to die so you could put it to print, weren't you, Harry? But we all know that the late Queen couldn't have meant everything to him, because who would do that to someone who meant everything to you? Who would betray them at that moment? And do you think that he actually asked permission from anyone in his family? Do you think that he actually contacted them before the book was published and even cared enough to think, this might give them a real shock if they did happen to read it? Thank goodness they didn't. But if they did happen to read it, this might give them a shock. It might really upset them 4 short months after their grandmother died. She died in September, and the following January, this was out. Can you believe it? And I really don't think it's got the attention or the condemnation that it really deserves. Let me know what you think down below. I'd love to read what you have to say, and I'll see you again really soon. Bye. Bye.